The Interstellar Museum of Extinct Species loomed like an oversized mausoleum in the void, an ark of forgotten life forms that had the unfortunate luck of crossing paths with extinction. Dr. Taran Voss, a human xenobiologist with a penchant for sarcasm and a wardrobe of lab coats oddly reminiscent of a mad scientist's catalogue, was about to make an entry that would redefine, unlucky, for her expedition team. "Never thought I'd see the day," Taran muttered as she disembarked from the decrepit shuttle, lovingly dubbed the Rusty Bucket. It was a ship that had more in common with a flying dumpster than a state-of-the-art spacecraft, but it got them here. Mostly in one piece. Her team followed suit, a motley crew of misfits who each bore the marks of too little sleep and too much caffeine. "Cheer up, folks," she said, trying to sound optimistic. "We might actually find something that doesn't try to kill us here." "Or worse," grumbled Jax, the mission's reluctant engineer, whose idea of optimism was a cup of coffee that wasn't burnt. "We find something that's already dead and still manages to screw us over." The museum's entrance was grandiose in the way only something built by a committee of bureaucrats could be, unnecessarily large and tragically devoid of character. They shuffled inside, greeted by the sterile hum of machinery and the faint smell of recycled air, like a hospital corridor that had given up on trying to smell clean. "Welcome, travelers," chimed an voice that was far too cheerful for the decor. "To the Interstellar Museum of Extinct Species. Please enjoy your stay, and remember, touching the exhibits is strictly prohibited." "Touching, hell. I'm more worried about something touching us," Taran snorted, her mind already calculating the statistical improbability of such a vast collection not having at least one catastrophic security breach over the decades. They walked through endless corridors housing specimens that were once the pride of their respective ecosystems. Now, they were nothing more than glorified paperweights. Taran paused in front of the glass cases, peering at alien creatures immortalized in their last gasps of life. "You know," she remarked with a smirk, "when they said, extinct, I didn't realize they meant, stuffed and mounted. It's like a cosmic taxidermist's wet dream in here." The team snickered, their laughter echoing off the metal walls. It was the kind of humor that kept them sane when faced with the absurdity of it all. Each display was a reminder of the universe's casual brutality, a parade of genetic losers and cosmic accidents. As they delved deeper, Taran's eyes caught a door marked, Restricted Archive. Her curiosity piqued. "All right, team, time to earn our hazard pay." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Boss, you know, restricted usually means, don't touch under penalty of something worse than death, right?" "Ah, but that's what makes it fun," Taran replied, her grin widening. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Another extinction?" With a shrug that spoke volumes about his faith in this particular plan, Jax hacked the lock. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous room filled with stasis chambers. Shelves upon shelves of genetic samples lined the walls, each vial a time capsule waiting to unleash its contents back into the cosmos. "Welcome to the fridge of the universe's leftovers," Taran quipped, feeling very much like a kid in a candy store, if that store had an aisle dedicated to potentially murderous creatures. They moved cautiously between the rows, Taran's eyes scanning the labels. She paused at one, her interest piqued by the name. Ancient Species 3412. Classified Extinct Precursor. "Sounds ominous," Jax commented, peering over her shoulder. "Or like a bad sci-fi movie." Taran's fingers hovered over the release latch, a spark of mischief in her eyes. Only one way to find out. With a flick, the chamber unlocked, and a vial slid out, the liquid inside shimmering ominously. "Congratulations," she said, holding it up like a trophy. "We've officially poked the universe with a stick." The team gathered around, curiosity mixed with a healthy dose of dread. The air felt charged, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if their curiosity would indeed prove lethal. "What now?" asked Rena, the team's biologist, who had a talent for finding silver linings, or at least tarnished ones. "Now," Taran replied, "we play God, or rather, we see if the gods of bureaucracy got something right for once." She carefully placed the vial into a portable analyzer. The readout blinked to life, displaying data that danced across the screen like a cosmic joke only they could appreciate. Well, Taran mused, her voice tinged with dark amusement. "Looks like we've got ourselves a bona fide relic. Ancient DNA, predating most known sentient lifeforms." Jax crossed his arms, his skepticism as palpable as the stale air around them. "And what do we do with a relic? Put it on a shelf next to the other mistakes of history?" "Maybe," Taran said, shrugging. "Or maybe we see if it's more than just a relic." They all knew the risks, but then again, they had come this far. Curiosity killed the cat, the saying went, but Taran preferred the lesser-known follow-up, but satisfaction brought it back. "Let's wake it up," she declared, as if it were the most natural decision in the world. Wake it up, Rena echoed, her eyebrows shooting up. I thought we were just looking. Looking's boring, Taran said with a grin that bordered on reckless. Besides, it's already extinct. How much trouble can it cause? Famous last words, perhaps, but in a universe where nothing was certain except its vast and indifferent cruelty, Taran figured they might as well enjoy the ride. With practiced hands, they set up the equipment, their movements a ballet of scientific precision and underlying tension. The room's lights dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to creep closer with every passing minute. You know, Jax remarked as he adjusted the settings, this is how every horror movie starts. Yeah, Taran replied, not missing a beat. But since when did we let a little thing like certain doom stop us? The machine hummed to life, a low thrumming sound that resonated in their bones. The vial sat in the center, its contents beginning to swirl as the reanimation process commenced. They watched, a mix of anticipation and dread bubbling in their chests. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room became a palpable entity, coiling around them like a living thing. Would this be the discovery of a lifetime, or a footnote in their obituary? The machine beeped, signaling the completion of its task. They leaned in as the chamber's door opened, revealing the results of their daring, or foolhardy, experiment. Inside, the essence of the ancient species shimmered, sparks of energy dancing across its surface like miniature lightning storms. It was beautiful in a way only something potentially deadly could be. Well, Taran said, breaking the silence with a voice that held a touch of awe. Looks like we've got company. And just like that, the universe took their challenge and raised them one ancient, possibly murderous entity. The question now was who would blink first, the humans with their irreverence and stubborn streak, or the universe with its eternal, indifferent gaze. Only time would tell, and in the depths of space, they had plenty of that. The newly awakened ancient entity glowed ominously within its chamber, as if the universe had just blown him a raspberry. Taran's eyes danced with the kind of curiosity that usually gets cats killed, but she was no feline and had a doctorate to prove it. Jax leaned back, arms crossed, and eyed the shimmering spectacle. Well, if it doesn't murder us outright, maybe we'll get a Nobel Prize. Not that we'll be around to enjoy it. Rena squinted at the data flashing on the analyzer screen, her eyebrows doing an impressive imitation of the Space Needle. This thing's DNA is like a genetic buffet of everything you don't want in a living organism. Predatory instincts? Check. High adaptability? Check. An appetite for destruction? Double check. An apex predator? Taran mused, sounding far too excited for anyone's comfort. From a time when apex meant, top of the food chain and damn proud of it. Right, Jax muttered, because what we really needed was a Darwinian nightmare woken up in our faces. The room hummed with the soft sounds of machinery, the only thing reassuring in a place where the past might decide it wants a new future. The others exchanged glances that communicated volumes. Taran's enthusiasm, Jax's skepticism, Rena's cautious optimism, and a shared undercurrent of, what the hell have we done? Look, Rena said, her voice shaking off the dust of hesitation. We need to talk about this. We're playing with something that once had the galaxy under its thumb. Are we really willing to let that kind of power roam free again? Taran waved a dismissive hand, as if brushing away Rena's concerns like lint. Oh, come on, it's not like we're setting it loose on an unsuspecting universe. We just want to understand it. Understand it, Jax echoed, or unleash it. There's a fine line, and we seem hell-bent on crossing it. I'm just saying, Rena continued, that maybe some things are best left extinct. I mean, look around. The museum's full of extinct species for a reason. Yeah, because they lost, Taran shot back. But what if this one can tell us why? It's a glimpse into a past we know nothing about. Every ecological catastrophe had its survivors, after all. Jax snorted. Or we could be resurrecting the universe's original jerk. The kind that made extinction events look like a mild inconvenience. Silence fell, punctuated only by the distant whir of air filters. The enormity of their undertaking hung in the air like a particularly stubborn stench. It was one thing to find a relic of the past, it was another thing entirely to risk the future on the whims of that relic. So, what, we just abort the mission? Taran asked, more to herself than the others. Pack it up and pretend we didn't just peek behind the cosmic curtain. Rena sighed, a sound that carried the weight of too many ethical debates over too little coffee. Nobody's saying we should just back away. But maybe we should be cautious. Study it more, understand the risks before we go full Dr. Frankenstein. Caution, Jax said, rolling his eyes. The part of the plan we usually skip. Fine, Taran conceded, though her tone suggested she was doing everyone a favor. We take it slow, we study it first. The agreement felt shaky, like a bridge built on quicksand. But it was something, and in this line of work, something often had to be good enough. They set about analyzing the data, diving into the genetic blueprints of a creature that had once dominated its world. Each new discovery felt like opening a Pandora's box with a sticky note reading, for science. Rena pointed at a particularly alarming sequence. This genetic marker here, it's an indication of rapid adaptation. This thing could survive just about anywhere and evolve faster than a politician's promise. Jack scratched his head, eyes flicking between the data and the glowing specimen. So we're basically dealing with a space cockroach on steroids. More like a space velociraptor, Taryn corrected, her voice tinged with a mix of dread and awe. But yeah, it could make a cockroach look like an amateur. They worked in tense silence, each new piece of data adding to the growing picture of what they'd awakened. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, like juggling knives while blindfolded. Look, Jack said, breaking the silence like a hammer through glass. We can argue ethics and consequences until we're blue in the face, or dead, but what's our actual plan here? Taryn leaned back, letting out a breath she'd been holding without realizing it. We analyze, we learn, and we keep it contained. Completely. No funny business. Jax chuckled darkly. Funny business? In this museum of horrors? Perish the thought. All jokes aside, Rena said, her tone serious, we need to be damn sure we're not playing with fire. Or an alien flamethrower. The team nodded, a solemn agreement that they were stepping into deep waters and hoping there weren't any sharks, or space raptors, lurking beneath the surface. Over the next few hours, they painstakingly documented every piece of information they could glean from the ancient DNA. The more they learned, the more apparent it became that this wasn't just a relic from the past. It was a warning label, one they might have been better off not reading. Taryn couldn't help but feel a thrill at the discovery, even as her rational mind screamed for caution. The universe was a vast, unknowable beast, and they'd just poked one of its forgotten secrets with a stick. Jax, ever the pessimist, summed it up nicely. Congratulations, folks. We've found the universe's equivalent of an unexploded bomb. Now we just have to figure out which wire not to cut. Comforting, Rena muttered, her voice laced with dry irony. Hey, Jax replied with a shrug, I'm all about the silver linings. They continued their work, the glow of the specimen casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls like specters of a past that refused to stay buried. The air grew thick with unspoken questions and unvoiced fears. Jax finally broke the silence, his voice a low rumble. So, what do we tell the higher-ups? Hey, we found a potential galactic threat. Happy Monday. We tell them the truth, Taryn said firmly, though the words felt hollow. We've found something incredible, and we're taking every precaution. Precautions, Jax repeated with a snort. Like that's ever stopped the universe from having a good laugh at our expense. Despite the jokes, the sarcasm, the gallows humor, they all knew the gravity of what they were dealing with. It wasn't just about the discovery. It was about what they did with it. How they chose to handle the power that lay dormant, waiting for a chance to claw its way back into relevance. As they packed up their equipment, the team couldn't shake the feeling that they'd crossed a line. One that separated mere curiosity from dangerous meddling. The future was uncertain, and so were their roles in it. But for now, they'd done the best they could, worked, joked, and debated their way through another day at the edge of the universe's vast, indifferent tapestry. They were explorers, scientists, fools in lab coats, trying to make sense of a cosmos that rarely made sense itself. And as they left the restricted archive, Taryn couldn't help but glance back at the shimmering vial, feeling the weight of the responsibility that came with curiosity, and the thrill of having poked the universe, just to see what would happen. Here's to not getting fired, Jax said with a crooked grin as they exited. Taryn laughed, the sound echoing in the hall like a defiant challenge to the cosmos. Yeah, or eaten. It was a grim, uncertain path ahead, but that was nothing new. After all, in a universe where extinction was just another Tuesday, they had to find their own way to survive, and maybe, just maybe, change that narrative. The Interstellar Museum of Extinct Species was, in Taryn's professional opinion, the greatest collection of biological failure ever amassed. It was a tribute to nature's losers, the evolutionary dead ends snuffed out by time and circumstance. And now, nestled deep within, they had an exhibit that not only defied extinction but seemed to have the potential to turn the tables on it. The ancient entity was still contained, a glowing reminder that sometimes, curiosity isn't just a cat killer, it's a universal hazard. Okay, let's go over this one more time, Jax said, his voice halfway between a yawn and a sneer. We wake up this thing, study its DNA, and try not to become its next meal. That about sums it up. Taryn adjusted her lab coat, which had seen better days, and offered a sardonic grin. You've got a knack for simulating enthusiasm, Jax. Ever consider motivational speaking? He snorted. Nah, too much work. Besides, I prefer my existential dread unfiltered. Rena was leaning over the analyzer's screen, her fingers dancing over the controls like a pianist playing a dirge. Something's off here. The energy readings are fluctuating. Define off, Jack said, crossing his arms. Because in this place, that could mean anything from a little damp to run for your lives. Taran moved closer, peering at the screen. The energy levels were stable before. Now they're spiking like it's having a party we weren't invited to. Maybe it heard about the Nobel Prize, Jack suggested, and is planning its acceptance speech. Or maybe, Rena said thoughtfully, we've got a bigger problem. The containment field is tied to these energy readings. If they keep fluctuating, we might end up with one very free and very hungry apex predator. Fan-fucking-tastic, Jax muttered. Nothing like a potential massacre to spice up a Tuesday. Taran checked the power supply, her face a mask of controlled panic. All systems are supposed to be stable. We checked everything before we started. Rena looked up from her console, her voice tinged with frustration. Well, it seems someone forgot to send the memo to our friend in the chamber. Could it be sabotage? Jax asked, leaning in as if expecting to find a smoking gun amidst the wires and circuits. Who'd want to sabotage a museum? Taran replied, keeping her tone light despite the tension. It's not like we're guarding the crown jewels. Maybe there's a rogue group out there with a vendetta against extinct species, Rena suggested dryly. The Extinction Enthusiasts Club or something. Either way, Taran said, we need to stabilize the system before it decides to throw a tantrum big enough to break out. They focused their efforts on the readouts, wrestling the errant system into submission with the determination of people who very much wanted to remain uneaten. Rena, who was practically glued to her analyzer screen, suddenly scowled. The software's not responding. It's like it's got a mind of its own. Maybe it does, Jax said, deadpan. Or maybe it's just tired of your constant nagging. Taran tapped a few buttons, trying to override the glitches. If this thing gets loose, we won't have to worry about who screwed up. We'll be too busy auditioning for lunch. The lights flickered, a soft warning that whatever was happening under their feet was far from routine. Jax watched the bulbs dance overhead, his expression one of resigned amusement. This is it, isn't it? The universe's punchline to our little joke. Taran didn't bother to respond, too focused on trying to stabilize the system. Her fingers flew over the controls, a symphony of frantic keystrokes that seemed to do little more than add to the chaos. All right, she said finally, her voice tight with strain. I've got a temporary patch in place. It should hold long enough for us to figure out what the hell's going on. Should, Jax repeated, raising an eyebrow. Not the most comforting word in the English language. Rena sighed, a sound that seemed to encapsulate the weight of their predicament. Okay, we need to find out if someone messed with the hardware or if it's just falling apart on its own. Right, Taran agreed. Let's check the power conduits first. Maybe there's a short somewhere. They moved through the museum like reluctant ghost hunters, searching for any sign of tampering or malfunction. The corridors were eerily silent, the exhibits watching them with eyes that had long since ceased to see. Who would have thought our careers would come to this, Jax said, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. Poking around in the dark for something that might eat us. Some people dream of being astronauts, Taran replied, others xenobiologists. And here we are, living the dream. Living the nightmare, more like, Jax shot back. He paused by a junction box, tapping the casing with a knuckle. Doesn't look out of place. Guess the universe just hates us. Rena checked another set of readings, frowning at the data. I've got nothing suspicious either. Maybe it really is just a fluke. Or, Taran said with a sardonic smile, our little friend is playing games with us. As if to punctuate her words, there was a sudden, sharp pop from somewhere above them, followed by a shower of sparks that rained down like cosmic confetti. Jax jumped back, swearing under his breath. Yup, he said, rubbing his head where a stray spark had landed. Definitely sabotage. By the universe itself. Taran shook her head, trying to maintain some semblance of control. Let's get back to the chamber. Maybe the system's stabilized now. They retraced their steps, moving quickly through the dimly lit corridors. It was hard not to feel a creeping sense of dread, like walking into a trap that had been laid just for them. The chamber loomed ahead, its doors wide open in silent invitation. Inside, the analyzer screen blinked with data, the ancient entity glowing with an unsettling intensity. Okay, Taran said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Let's see if our temporary fix held. Rena checked the readings, relief washing over her face. Looks stable. For now. Jax nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. For now. Not exactly the reassurance I was hoping for. Hey, Taran replied, offering a wry smile. You want guarantees? Go buy a toaster. They settled back into their work, the weight of their earlier anxiety slowly lifting. But the tension in the room never fully dissipated, like a bad smell that clung to their clothes. "All right," Rena said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "If we're going to keep this thing contained, we need to find out what's behind these fluctuations." "Agreed," Taryn replied. "Let's focus on the energy readings. Maybe there's a pattern we're missing." As they pored over the data, the room hummed with the soft buzz of activity. The entity remained in its chamber, a silent observer of their efforts, its presence a constant reminder of the stakes. Jax, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "You ever wonder why it's so quiet in here? I mean, besides the obvious." Taryn glanced up, caught off guard by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jax continued, "it's like this place is waiting for something. Like it's holding its breath." "Great," Taryn said, flashing a sarcastic grin. "Now you've got me paranoid." Rena chuckled, though it was clear she felt the same unease. "Let's just focus on not giving it a reason to breathe." They worked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. It was easy to forget, amidst the data and the confinement of the museum, that they were dealing with something that defied understanding. The hours passed slowly, the fluctuations becoming less frequent but no less concerning. It was like trying to plug holes in a dam with nothing but their fingers and a prayer. "All right," Taryn said, breaking the silence. "I've adjusted the power flow to the containment field. It should help stabilize things." "Should," Jax said again, the word now a familiar refrain. "There's that word again." "Look," Taryn replied, "we're doing the best we can. If this thing gets loose, it's not because we didn't try." Rena nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and if anyone questions it, we'll tell them exactly how eager we were to get eaten." The tension in the room seemed to lift a little, replaced by a quiet determination. They were in this together, come what may, and there was something comforting in that solidarity. As they continued their work, the analyzer screen flickered one last time, the data settling into a reassuringly stable pattern. The containment field held, the ancient entity confined for now. "Well," Jax said, leaning back in his chair. "Here's to another day without becoming lunch." "Cheers to that," Taryn replied, feeling a small measure of relief. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd bought themselves a little more time. Time to understand what they were dealing with, and maybe even find a way to keep the past from repeating itself. As they wrapped up their work for the day, the museum seemed to breathe a sigh of its own, the silence embracing them once more. It was a silence filled with possibilities, both dangerous and wondrous, a reminder that in the vastness of space, nothing is ever truly extinct. "Let's call it a day," Taryn said, stretching her arms overhead. "We've earned it." "Yeah," Jax agreed, standing up with a groan. "And if we're lucky, maybe tomorrow won't try to kill us." "That's the spirit," Rena replied, her voice tinged with irony. They left the chamber, the ancient entity still glowing softly in its confinement, a reminder of the unknowns they faced. It was a strange comfort, knowing that some puzzles have no easy solutions. But then, that's what made them worth solving. As they exited the museum, the doors closed behind them with a soft, mechanical sigh. The universe was a dangerous place, but it was also full of wonders waiting to be discovered, and they were determined to uncover them, one cautious step at a time. The next morning, Taryn Voss arrived at the Interstellar Museum of Extinct Species with a fresh cup of synth coffee and the weight of impending doom that was as familiar as her lab coat. The smell of burnt plastic hung in the air, a testament to last night's electrical tantrum, and she suspected it would linger for days, like an unwanted guest that refused to leave long after everyone else had gotten the hint. Jax was already there, slouched against the wall like a poorly made scarecrow. "Morning, sunshine," he drawled, his voice more gravel than greeting. "Ready for another day of trying not to get eaten?" "Can't wait," Taryn replied dryly. "It's like Christmas, if Christmas involved ancient apex predators and the smell of fried circuitry." Rena was next to wander in, looking as haggard as the museum itself. "I'd kill for a vacation," she muttered. "Somewhere that doesn't include malfunctioning containment fields or homicidal relics of the past." "Don't forget the existential dread," Jax added, with a yawn that seemed to originate from his very soul. "That's a given," Rena retorted, rolling her eyes. "Now, what's today's crisis?" Before Taryn could spin the wheel of catastrophes, the museum's AI, chipper as ever, chimed in. "Good morning, esteemed guests. Remember, touching the exhibits is strictly prohibited. Have a delightful day." "Great," Taryn said, glancing at her colleagues. "Even the AI is in a good mood. That's got to be a bad omen." Rena settled in front of her analyzer screen, fingers tapping a dissonant rhythm against the controls. "Let's look at the energy readings again. Maybe there's something we missed during last night's festivities." Jax snorted. "Festivities. That's one way to describe nearly becoming dinner." As they scanned the data, Taran couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial, like the punchline to a cosmic joke. The energy levels were stable for now, but the slight tremor in the readings suggested that stability was about as reliable as Jax's morning disposition. Okay, Taran announced, eyes narrowing at the screen like it had personally offended her. There's a slight increase in energy emissions. It's almost like the entity's starting to wake up. Fantastic, Jax said, his enthusiasm as present as an albino on a moonless night. What's next? It demands a cup of coffee and the morning news. Rena shot him a look. Great, because coffee and murderous ancient entities are just what this place needs. Well, someone call the universe, tell it to cancel our lunch plans, Taran deadpanned. Looks like we're working through the apocalypse. They started analyzing the data, trying to pinpoint the trigger for the energy spike. It wasn't long before Taran's hunch was confirmed. The readings were sporadic, but there was a pattern, a rising and falling that suggested something deeper was at work. Look at this, Taran said, pointing to the screen. The energy spikes coincide with fluctuations in the containment field. Like it's testing the waters, Jax said, leaning in. Seeing if the pool's warm enough before it dives in. Or if the fence still has a charge before it makes a run for it, Rena added, her voice tinged with irony. Just as they began formulating a plan, the lights flickered ominously, and the AI's voice, usually as chipper as a children's show host, dipped into something much less comforting. Warning, containment field instability detected. Please remain calm. Calm, Taran echoed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Who programmed this thing? A sadist. Next it'll offer us a complimentary bag of peanuts, Jax quipped, though his eyes were glued to the screen, tension written all over his face. The containment field's instability was no joke. The energy readings were climbing again, and this time the spikes were sharper, more aggressive, like whatever was inside was growing impatient. Okay, let's think, Rena said, her fingers dancing over the controls with the dexterity of a card shark. We need to stabilize the field long enough to figure out what's causing these fluctuations. Right, Taran agreed, her mind racing. What about rerouting some of the auxiliary power to bolster the containment field? Risky, Jax pointed out, but it could work. Or it could turn this place into the universe's biggest paperweight. Do we have a choice? Taran shot back, her eyes never leaving the screen. Unless you want to try negotiating with it. Pass, Jax said, raising his hands in mock surrender. I left my translation book for ancient homicidal entities in my other pants. Then let's do it, Rena decided, already working on the power rerouting, her focus absolute. If it fails, well, at least we won't have to worry about our next performance review. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as they implemented the emergency measures. Every flicker of the lights, every tremor in the readings, felt like a countdown to disaster. Rerouting power now, Rena announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. The museum's lights dimmed momentarily, a heartbeat away from total darkness, before stabilizing once more. How's it looking? Taran asked, not daring to hope. The field's holding, Rena replied, relief evident in her voice. For now, anyway. Another, for now, Jax commented, leaning back in his chair. I love that word, really inspires confidence. Hey, Taran said, managing a wry smile despite everything, we're still here, aren't we? That counts for something. The AI's voice chimed in again, back to its usual chirpiness. Containment field stabilized. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Hal, Jax grumbled, rubbing his temples. Rena let out a long breath, leaning back from the analyzer. Okay, we bought ourselves some time. Now what? Now, Taran said, her mind already spinning with possibilities, we figure out why this thing's waking up. There's got to be a reason. Maybe it's like you, doesn't function well before noon, Jax suggested, earning himself a glare from Taran. Or maybe, Rena interrupted, it's reacting to something specific in the environment. Something we've overlooked. Like what? Taran asked, though her curiosity was piqued. I don't know, Rena admitted, but we need to find out. Otherwise, we're just sitting ducks in a very dangerous pond. Well, let's start with the basics, Taran suggested. Temperature, pressure, any changes in atmospheric conditions. They began their investigation, combing through the museum's environmental data with the thoroughness of people who had a vested interest in not becoming extinct themselves. The readings were unremarkable, the numbers steady, belying any obvious source of interference. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, Jax said, though his fingers never stopped moving over the controls. Except the needle's invisible, and the haystack might kill us. Charming imagery, Rena said, her voice dry as a desert. But he's not wrong. Just then, amidst their search, a new reading flashed across the screen, an anomaly buried deep within the data. Taran's eyes narrowed, her attention laser-focused. Hold on, What's this? Rena zoomed in on the new information, her fingers flying over the keyboard. It's an older reading, buried in the logs. Looks like a surge from the entity's life systems. A surge? Like it's trying to power up? Taryn asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Maybe. It's not fully active yet, but if it keeps getting stronger. Rena let the sentence hang, the implication clear. Then it's only a matter of time before it breaks free, Jax finished, his tone matter of fact. And we'll be the welcoming committee. Great, Taryn muttered. Just what I needed, a ticking time bomb with fangs. Think we can reset it somehow? Jax asked, though it was clear he didn't hold much hope for that option. Reset it? Rena echoed, her sarcasm cutting. What do you suggest, unplugging it and plugging it back in? Well, it works on my toaster, Jax said with a shrug, as though grasping at straws was a professional skill. Taryn shook her head, a mixture of frustration and determination driving her forward. Okay, enough joking. We need to understand why it's waking up. There has to be a trigger. Agreed, Rena said, her focus returning to the screen. Let's dig deeper into the environmental data. Maybe something's changed that we haven't accounted for. As they continued their search, the museum seemed to breathe around them, the faint hum of machinery a constant reminder of their precarious situation. It was a place filled with wonders and dangers, a testament to the universe's ability to surprise and scare the hell out of them all at once. Hey, Jax said, breaking the silence, speaking of surprises, you think the AI's part of this? I mean, it went from cheerful to warning us in a heartbeat. Taryn considered the idea, her mind racing. It's possible. If the entity's influence is spreading, it could be affecting the AI systems, too. Good, Jax said, his sarcasm unyielding. Because an eye with a death wish is exactly what we need right now. We'll worry about the AI later, Rena said firmly. Right now, our priority is keeping the thing contained. Agreed, Taryn said, her eyes scanning the data for any hint of a solution. Let's keep searching. We're not out of options yet. As they worked, the minutes stretched into hours, the tension in the room as thick as the layers of dust settled on the ancient exhibits. But beneath the pressure, there was a shared resolve, a grim determination that refused to fade. They were in this together, a mismatched trio facing the unknown with nothing but their wits and a few half-baked theories. The stakes were high, but so was their commitment to finding a solution. And if they happened to crack a few jokes along the way, well, that was just their way of coping with the insanity of it all. In the end, it didn't matter how dark things got. They were human, after all. Snarky, stubborn, and, above all, determined to survive, even if it meant turning the universe's sick sense of humor against itself. With a renewed sense of purpose, they dove back into the data, ready to face whatever the museum, the universe, threw at them next. Because in a place where anything could happen, nothing was ever truly extinct. And that included hope. Taryn leaned back in her chair, the familiar creak of old plastic echoing through the chamber. The kind of sound that reminded you how close you were to becoming space debris if things went south. All right, everyone, let's tally up our current assets. One malfunctioning AI, a potentially homicidal ancient entity, and a non-existent comm link to Earth. Anyone else feel like we're living in a cosmic joke? Jax snorted, the lines around his eyes crinkling with a mix of amusement and despair. I've heard of bad days at the office, but this is taking it to a whole new level. What do you want to bet our vacation days aren't going to cover this? Rena, rubbing her temples with one hand while the other danced over the control panel, muttered, I'd settle for 5 minutes of uninterrupted peace. But who needs serenity when you've got an unpredictable monster possibly about to crash your party? The museum's AI decided to chime in, its voice artificially bright. Please remember, touching the exhibits is strictly prohibited. Yeah, we got it, Taryn snapped. Touching the exhibits is bad. How about touching our sanity? Is that off limits too? The AI, in its infinite wisdom, chose silence over further commentary. Probably the smartest decision it had made all day. Okay, jokes aside, Taryn continued, forcing herself to focus, that last reading suggested the entity's life systems are trying to power up. We need to figure out what's triggering it before we end up as a cautionary tale in some other museum. Jax leaned back, crossing his arms. Any chance it's just having a nightmare? Maybe it's reliving its glory days of tearing through a planet's ecosystem. Lovely, Rena interjected, and here I was worried about my last performance review. The lights flickered once more, casting shadows that danced across the ancient exhibits like specters waiting for the cue to join the living. The kind of atmosphere that would make any sane person wish for a simple desk job. Let's narrow down the environmental factors, Taryn suggested, her fingers moving across the analyzer's screen. Pressure, temperature, radiation levels, anything. Maybe there's something subtle we've missed. Subtle, in a place like this? Jax asked, arching an eyebrow. Nothing subtle when you're one step away from becoming extinct yourself. Despite the grim humor, the reality of their isolation began to weigh heavily on them. Communication with Earth was a distant dream, the museum's outdated systems acting more like a black hole for signals than a lifeline. They were on their own, the full weight of the situation pressing down like the gravity of a neutron star. Feeling like a hamster in a cage yet? Rena asked, her tone wry. Oh, definitely, Jax replied. Except the hamsters being monitored by an entity that thinks hamsters are a delicacy. Taryn couldn't suppress a chuckle, despite the grim circumstances. It was moments like these that made her appreciate the irony of human resilience, making jokes when facing possible annihilation. If that wasn't the pinnacle of human spirit, she didn't know what was. All right, team, she finally said, a note of determination creeping into her voice. Let's focus. We're not dead yet, and I'm not about to write our obituaries. They delved back into the data, the screens glowing ominously in the dim light. Each reading was scrutinized, each anomaly debated, the desperation in their voices barely masked by sarcasm. As they worked, a nagging thought tugged at the back of Taryn's mind. What if the entity's awakening wasn't just a fluke of environment but something more intentional? The idea was unsettling, like the chill you get when you realize the silence is too loud. Hey, she said, breaking the silence, what if this isn't just about the environment? What if something, or someone, is trying to wake it up? Jax stopped, his expression shifting from amused skepticism to serious contemplation. You mean sabotage, or maybe just a really pissed-off ghost with a vendetta against museums? Why not? Rena quipped. Wouldn't be the first time someone's tried to make their mark by blowing things up. But how? Jax asked. All our systems are supposed to be locked down tighter than, well, us right now. Supposed to be, Taryn echoed. The room was so quiet she could almost hear the gears turning in their heads. So, what are we saying here? Jax asked, breaking the silence. Someone's out to make a little chaos with a side of extinction. It's a long shot, Taryn admitted, but if this entity's been dormant for millennia, something big would have to change for it to start waking up. Dormant, huh? Jax mused. Sounds a lot like me on a Monday. Except your Monday's not likely to end with you eating half the galaxy, Rena shot back. Small mercies, Jax replied. They were interrupted by another flicker of the lights, the museum seeming to exhale as if it had been holding its breath for centuries and finally remembered how lungs worked. Well, Taryn said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing around them, first things first. We figure out if this is sabotage or just a cosmic coincidence. Either way, the outcome's not looking too rosy. Agreed, Jax said, his hands moving over the controls like a pianist at a grim recital. But if we're dealing with someone with a death wish, why pick now? Why not? Rena replied with a shrug. Maybe the universe is just having a laugh at our expense. If it is, Taryn said with a grim smile, then it's got a twisted sense of humor. They dove deeper into the logs, searching for any sign of intrusion or tampering. But the museum's systems were like a convoluted puzzle, each piece more cryptic than the last. And just when they thought they had a handle on things, a new alert blared from the analyzer screen, shattering the fragile illusion of calm they'd managed to maintain. What's that? Jax asked, his voice strained. Taryn's eyes flicked to the screen, her heart sinking. Another surge, stronger this time. Perfect, Rena muttered, her sarcasm as sharp as a knife. Because we didn't have enough to worry about. The readings climbed steadily, the numbers a stark reminder of their precarious situation. Each spike in energy felt like a step closer to the edge of a cliff, one they had no desire to fall off. So, options? Jax asked, his voice laced with a grim determination. We need to stabilize it, figure out the trigger, and hope we don't end up as a side dish, Taryn replied, her tone flat. Great plan, Jax said dryly. And here I thought we weren't ambitious enough. They worked in tense silence, the weight of their isolation pressing in from all sides. The museum, with its silent exhibits and ancient artifacts, felt more like a tomb than a place of learning, a reminder of the transience of life in a universe indifferent to their struggles. It was a stark realization, and it brought with it a renewed sense of urgency. They were alone, their lifeline to Earth severed, their fate resting in their hands. There was no cavalry coming, no Deus Ex Machina to save the day. Just them, their wit, and a hope that refused to die. Hey, Jax said, breaking the silence once more, whatever happens, we gave it our best shot, right? Taryn met his gaze, a small, defiant smile on her lips. Yeah, and if we go down, we'll make sure they remember us, not just as the idiots who unleashed a monster, but the ones who fought it to the end. Charming epitaph, Rena said, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice. Though I'd prefer not to test it just yet. With renewed determination, they tackled the problem, their camaraderie a small light in the encroaching darkness. They were scientists, thinkers, problem solvers, and though the odds were stacked against them, they refused to give up. Not now, not ever. Hours passed in a blur of data and strategy, each moment a battle against the unknown. But amidst the chaos, there was a sense of purpose, a belief that they could still make a difference. Because in a universe as vast and unpredictable as theirs, nothing was certain. Not even the end. Taryn Voss stared at the flickering lights, feeling like she was trapped inside a malfunctioning disco ball with homicidal tendencies. If there was one thing she hated more than being stuck in a museum with an ancient entity on the verge of waking, it was being stuck with one without a damn clue how to keep it asleep. "All right, team," she said, trying to inject some semblance of leadership into her voice. "We've got to figure out what this thing's favorite lullaby is before it decides to make us part of the exhibit." Jax, ever the optimist, leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, because getting eaten alive by a prehistoric monster just screams career advancement." Rena, her fingers still dancing over the control panel like it was a particularly uncooperative piano, looked up. "Career advancement my ass. I'm just hoping not to end up as a cautionary tale for future interns." "Speaking of tales," Taryn said, tapping her chin thoughtfully, "maybe there's more to this place than meets the eye. It is a museum, after all. They've got to have records stashed away somewhere." Jax perked up, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You think they have an Ancient Entity 101 manual lying around? How to avoid being eaten in 3 easy steps? If they do, I'm getting it laminated and framed," Rena chimed in. Taryn smirked, despite herself. "Let's see if we can find an access point to the museum's records. There's got to be something we can use to keep the big bad wolf from blowing our house down. Or eating our hearts out," Jax added helpfully. They split up, each taking a section of the museum. The place was a labyrinth of poorly labeled corridors and displays that would have made a hoarder proud. Taryn found herself in front of a dusty plaque, which probably hadn't been cleaned since the dawn of time. She squinted at the faded lettering. Well, she murmured, "what do we have here?" Behind the plaque, a hidden panel revealed itself, its surface blinking faintly like it was shy. With a bit of finagling and more than a few choice words, Taryn managed to coax it open, revealing a console that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought buttons were a passing fad. "Found something?" Rena's voice came over the comm, crackling slightly with static. "Yeah, a relic from the Stone Age," Taryn replied, her fingers brushing over the console. "Let's see if I can make this thing talk." The console hummed to life, flickering with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for a Monday morning. A series of holographic records floated before her, detailing the entity's species history in all its gory glory. A treasure trove of knowledge, assuming she could decipher it before the entity decided to make a dramatic entrance. "All right, team, gather round," Taryn called. "We've got some bedtime stories to read." Jax and Rena converged on her location, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and dread. Taryn gestured at the holographic display, which kindly informed him of the entity's charming past. "Meet the Apex Predominus," she said, her tone dripping with irony. "Formerly known as the bane of lesser species. It appears they weren't just big and ugly, they were smart, adaptable, and had a taste for destruction." "Sound familiar? Like looking in a cosmic mirror," Jax quipped. "Except this one's probably less charming." Rena leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. "Looks like they were kings of their ecosystem until, surprise surprise, they weren't. Extinction event, courtesy of their own hubris. So, basically, they ate themselves out of house and home," Taryn summarized. "Good to know even apex predators can suffer from poor planning." "But wait," Jax interjected, pointing at a particular line of text. "Says here they had a weakness. Something about a neural disruptor used by a rival species." Taryn's interest peaked. "That could be our golden ticket. If we can replicate whatever that disruptor was, we might just have a shot at keeping Snoozy over there from waking up." "And if we can't?" Rena asked, ever the pragmatist. "Then we start a betting pool on who gets eaten first," Jax suggested. Taryn continued to study the records, piecing together the story of a species that had ruled with an iron, well, whatever it was they used, only to fall victim to their own arrogance. It was almost poetic, in a cosmic joke at our expense kind of way. "Okay, here's the plan," Taryn announced, turning to face her comrades in chaos. "We need to cobble together a neural disruptor. It doesn't have to be pretty, just functional. Think Frankenstein's monster meets modern-day ingenuity." "Got it," Jax said, rubbing his hands together like a kid in a candy store. "Scavenger hunt for ancient tech it is. Rena, keep an eye on the energy fluctuations," Taryn instructed. "If anything spikes, we need to be ready to act." "On it," Rena replied, already moving back to her station. As they set to work, the museum's atmosphere seemed to grow heavier, the weight of their task pressing down like a cosmic anvil. But beneath the tension, a flicker of hope kindled. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. Hours ticked by, the sound of tinkering and the occasional muttered curse filling the air. With whatever they could scrounge from the museum's archives, they pieced together a makeshift neural disruptor. It looked more like a child's science project than a sophisticated piece of tech, but it had potential. "All right," Taran said, inspecting their handiwork with a critical eye. "Moment of truth. Let's see if this thing can really sing." "Sing?" Jax asked, an eyebrow arched in amusement. "Or at least hum a catchy tune," Taran replied with a wry smile. They wired the contraption into the museum's power grid, a process that involved more guesswork than any of them were comfortable with. But beggars couldn't be choosers, especially when their lives were on the line. "Ready?" Taran asked, her finger hovering over the activation switch. "As ready as we'll ever be," Rena said, sounding remarkably calm given the circumstances. Taran took a deep breath, then flipped the switch. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then a soft hum filled the room, the device coming to life with a gentle thrum that resonated through the air. "Well, it didn't explode," Jax noted with a hint of relief. "Yet," Rena added. They watched the analyzer's screen, the numbers steadying as the disruptor worked its magic. The entity's energy levels began to stabilize, the threat of an impromptu awakening receding like a bad dream at dawn. "Looks like we bought ourselves some time," Taran said, allowing herself a small smile. "A temporary reprieve," Jax corrected, though there was a glint of pride in his eyes. "Either way, it's a win," Rena said, her tone firm. "And I'll take it." With the immediate threat subdued, they took a moment to catch their breath, the weight of their ordeal settling over them like a dusty blanket. But beneath the fatigue and tension, a sense of camaraderie blossomed, a shared understanding that they'd faced the abyss together and lived to tell the tale. "Well," Taran said, stretching her arms above her head, "I'm not saying we're out of the woods yet, but at least we're not in the monster's belly." "Not today, anyway," Jax agreed with a wry grin. Rena glanced at the disruptor, then back at the team. "You know, I never thought I'd use my engineering degree to build a monster zapper." "Guess that's what they call thinking outside the box. Or outside the galaxy," Taran quipped. As they settled in for what promised to be a long night, the museum's silent exhibits seemed to watch over them, a testament to the power of human ingenuity in the face of impossible odds. They were weary, they were isolated, but they were far from defeated. And with a bit of luck, a dash of creativity, and a whole lot of stubbornness, they might just live to see another day. Which, in the grand scheme of things, was all any of them could ask for. "Hey," Jax said, breaking the silence, "next time we sign up for a mission, let's make sure it doesn't involve ancient death traps, yeah?" "Agreed," Taran replied with a chuckle. "But for now, let's focus on surviving this one. After all, we're not dead yet." And with that, they returned to their vigil, united by a shared determination that burned brighter than the stars outside. They might be a ragtag bunch of misfits, but they were resourceful ones. And if there was one thing the universe should never underestimate, it was the tenacity of the human spirit. Because in a galaxy full of monsters, sometimes the scariest thing of all was an underdog with nothing to lose. The museum was oppressively silent, the kind of quiet that made you wonder if space itself was holding its breath. If it was, it probably caught a whiff of Jax's lunch. The team was gathered around their makeshift neural disruptor, a device that looked like it was held together by sheer willpower and a misplaced faith in duct tape. Taran Voss, who had somehow stumbled into the role of leader, was staring at the analyzer screen like it owed her money. "All right, team," she began, with the enthusiasm of a person trying to rally a group of cats. "We've got our monster zapper operational. Now comes the fun part, making sure it does its job." "Fun," Jax repeated as if tasting the word and finding it bitter. "You know, I prefer the kind of fun that doesn't involve potential evisceration." "At least you're optimistic about it," Rena quipped from her post, where she was monitoring the energy levels. "There's a certain thrill in knowing you could become a cosmic snack, right?" "Thrill?" Jax gave a mock shudder. "I was thinking more in the realm of existential dread, but sure, we'll go with thrill." Taran adjusted her lab coat, which seemed to have absorbed more synth coffee than a sponge. "Here's the plan. We keep an eye on those energy readings. If they spike, we hit the disruptor harder than the universe hit my career prospects." "Plan B?" Jax asked, always the one to see the silver lining, even if it was just tinfoil. "Plan B is running like hell," Taran replied dryly. "Or, I suppose, Plan B is hoping there isn't a Plan B." They settled into a tense vigil, eyes darting between the analyzer screen and the containment field, where the Apex Predominius lay dormant. It might have looked peaceful, but Taran knew better. This was the calm before the storm, or, given their luck, the calm before the cataclysm. Hours dragged by like a bad movie in slow motion. Jax, unable to sit still for long, began juggling small tools he found lying around. Rena, meanwhile, was still glued to the control panel, her fingers moving with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. Rena, Taran said, not looking up from the screen, if this goes south, I want you to know I never liked you. Feelings mutual, Taran, Rena replied, her eyes twinkling with sarcasm. I'll be sure to haunt you if I go first. Jax snorted, catching a wrench midair. And I'll make sure to put in a good word for you too in the afterlife. Maybe get you a nice haunted shuttle or something. Suddenly, Rena's face turned serious. Taran, we might have a problem here. Taran's head snapped up. Define problem. The energy levels are fluctuating, Rena said, her voice taut. And not in the, we're all safe, kind of way. Taran's mind raced, pulling together frayed strands of thought into a cohesive plan. Okay, Jax, get ready on the disruptor. Rena, monitor those numbers. Let me know if they start doing anything that looks like it's coming straight out of an action flick. Jax moved to the disruptor, his fingers hovering over the controls. Ready when you are, Chief. The numbers on the screen danced erratically, and Taran felt her stomach drop. This was it, the moment they'd been dreading. The entity was waking up. Jax, hit it, Taran shouted, her voice sharper than a jagged edge in the vacuum of space. Jax slammed his hand down on the control, and the disruptor roared to life, emitting a sound somewhere between a hum and a banshee's wail. The containment field flickered, and the numbers on the analyzer screen began to stabilize, albeit reluctantly. Is it working? Jax asked, his eyes never leaving the screen. For now, Rena replied, though her voice held no illusions. But it's a temporary fix. We're just patching up a sinking ship. Then we'd better find a lifeboat, Taran said, scanning the museum records for anything they might have missed. Amidst the chaos, a new line of text caught Taran's eye. It was a reference to the rival species and their neural disruptor. More importantly, it detailed how they had managed to contain the Apex Predominius without blowing themselves to smithereens. Guys, I think I've got it, Taran said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. The disruptor needs to be calibrated to the entity's specific neural patterns. It's like tuning a guitar, only this one bites. Jax and Rena exchanged a look, then nodded. Whatever you need, Taran, Jax said. We've come this far, might as well see it through. Rena began typing furiously, her fingers a blur on the control panel. I'm feeding in the data now. Let's hope this thing has a softer side. The disruptor whirred and clicked, adjusting its frequencies to match the entity's neural patterns. The effect was immediate and almost magical. The energy levels steadied, and the containment field solidified, more secure than a miser's wallet. Looks like we've got a handle on it, Taran said, her voice laced with disbelief. Did we just pull a miracle out of our collective asses? Jax asked, his expression one of incredulous glee. It would seem so, Rena replied, her lips curving into a rare smile. Guess we're not as hopeless as we look. They watched as the analyzer screen confirmed what they dared to hope. The immediate threat had been neutralized. The Apex Predominius was contained, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they could breathe easy. We did it, Taran said, a sense of relief washing over her. We actually did it. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the tension dissolving like mist under the sun. They were exhausted, disheveled, and running on fumes, but they had conquered the impossible. Through a mixture of tenacity, human ingenuity, and sheer dumb luck, they had triumphed over the galaxy's nastiest nightmare. As they stood amidst the remnants of their battlefield, a clutter of wires, tools, and half-empty mugs of synth coffee, a profound silence settled over them. It wasn't the oppressive silence of before, but rather the quiet of shared victory, the kind that speaks louder than any words. Well, Jax said, breaking the silence with his usual flair, I guess this calls for a celebration. Anyone up for some more synth coffee? Or maybe something a bit stronger? Anything but synth coffee, Rena groaned. I think my stomach's plotting a mutiny. Agreed, Taran said, glancing around at her crew. But first, let's make sure this containment holds. I'd rather not have a sequel to this little adventure. Rena nodded, already checking and rechecking the systems, her diligence as unwavering as ever. Jax, meanwhile, was rummaging through their supplies, muttering to himself about finding something that didn't taste like synthetic regret. As they settled into a more relaxed routine, the weight of their accomplishment began to sink in. They had faced an ancient terror and lived to tell the tale. More importantly, they had ensured that the entity would remain dormant, allowing future generations to study it without risking life and limb. Hey, Taryn, Jax said as he tossed her a bottle of something vaguely alcoholic. Here's to not getting eaten today. Taryn caught the bottle, a grin spreading across her face. And here's to doing it all again tomorrow, she replied, raising the bottle in a mock toast. Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that the universe is never short on surprises. Or ways to try and kill us, Rena added, her eyes alight with a mischievous glint. They clinked bottles, the soft chime a testament to their resilience and camaraderie. They were a ragtag team, held together by snark, ingenuity, and a refusal to back down. In a universe that seemed determined to test them at every turn, they had shown that sometimes, the underdogs could have the day. So, what's the next move, fearless leader? Jax asked, leaning back in his chair with the air of someone who had narrowly escaped something unpleasant. Taryn considered the question, her mind already racing ahead. We keep monitoring the entity, make sure the disruptor holds. And then, we report back to whoever's willing to listen. Maybe they'll even give us a medal, or at least a decent meal. A medal would be nice, Rena mused. Though I'd settle for a shower and a bed that doesn't feel like a slab of rock. Dream big, Rena, Jax laughed. Dream big. As they sat there, basking in the afterglow of their victory, the vastness of space stretched out beyond the museum walls, a reminder of the infinite mysteries and challenges that awaited them. But for now, they were content in the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. For in a galaxy teeming with danger and uncertainty, it was the little victories that mattered most. And as long as they had each other, they were ready to face whatever came next, with a smile on their faces and a sarcastic quip at the ready. All right, Taryn said, her voice strong and steady. Let's get to work, we've got an ancient entity to babysit, after all. And with that, the team got back to work, united by their shared purpose and an unshakable belief in their ability to defy the odds. They were far from perfect, but they were damn good at what they did. And in the grand scheme of things, that was more than enough. Taryn Voss leaned back in her chair and stared at the flickering lights of the containment field. The apex predominus was still, finally looking less like a time bomb and more like a particularly ugly statue. Well, that was fun. Let's not do it again, she quipped, rubbing her temples as if it would erase the memory of the past few hours. Fun, Jax replied, leaning against the wall, trying to look nonchalant despite the sweat staining his shirt. I'd rather spend a week locked in a room with my ex-mother-in-law. You were married? Rena asked, eyebrows disappearing into her hairline. Briefly, Jax replied, waving it off like a bad smell. Turns out, love doesn't conquer all when you're living in a shuttle that smells like burnt synth coffee and despair. Rena snorted, her fingers dancing over the control panel. If anyone asks, I'm deleting the data from my memory banks. Taryn let the banter wash over her, grateful for the levity. They'd survived, somehow, against odds that would have made a gambler weep. All right, team, let's wrap this up before the universe throws another curveball our way. Right, Jax said, pulling himself away from the wall with the enthusiasm of someone moving toward a dentist's chair. Time to see if this museum's eye is in a friendlier mood now. The museum's AI, a relic from when optimism was still in style, had been their cheerful nemesis throughout. A digital assistant with all the warmth and charm of a tax audit. Welcome back, esteemed guests, it chirped, its voice a sickly sweet sing-song. Please enjoy your stay and remember, touching the exhibits is strictly prohibited. Taryn grimaced. I've had root canals more enjoyable than this thing's voice. Let's hope it's more useful than before, Rena muttered, tapping keys with the kind of vigor usually reserved for slapping mosquitoes. We've got limited time before Earth demands an answer, or worse, sends another team. Jax chuckled, the sound dry as a desert. If they do, let's hope they send someone with a better taste in music. That last guy played space jazz at 3 a.m. Space jazz is an abomination, Taryn agreed. But let's focus on reporting this little adventure. Not sure how we'll keep a straight face while explaining we almost unleashed an apex predator because someone forgot to reboot an eye. Rena's eyes flicked to the containment field, now stable, the apex predominus blissfully unaware of its almost rampage. At least we can say we prevented a potential galactic disaster. That's got to count for something. Sure, Jax said, his grin sardonic. Maybe they'll name a trash heap after us. The museum systems purred back to life, screens flickering as data poured in. Taryn felt a strange mix of triumph and exhaustion. Let's transmit our findings. If nothing else, future generations need a good laugh at our expense. The AI, oblivious to anything beyond its programming, blinked to life on the main screen. Thank you for visiting the Interstellar Museum of Extinct Species. Your feedback is important to us. Please rate your experience from 1 to 5 stars. I'll give you a star, Jax said, rolling his eyes. Right up your Focus, Jax, Taran interrupted. We need to ensure this doesn't happen again. Rena nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I've got the report loaded. Just need to hit send and let the bureaucrats back home sort it out. With luck, they'll actually read it. That's the spirit, Taran said dryly. Blind hope, my favorite backup plan. The transmission zipped through space, carrying their tale of near disaster and questionable heroism to the powers that be. Taran imagined the reactions. Disbelief, laughter, more disbelief. But mostly, the faint hope that they might actually learn something from this mess. So, Jack said, stretching with a groan. What's the plan now? Wait for the thank you cards from Earth? Hardly, Taran replied, checking the time. We babysit this charming relic and hope nothing else tries to eat us. Or, failing that, at least nothing bigger. That's a comforting thought, Rena said, sarcasm dripping from every word. But hey, if the universe throws a party, at least we're invited. Taran shot her a sideways glance. It's not a party if you're on the menu. The team settled into a new routine, a sense of normalcy creeping back into their lives. Sure, the museum was still a monument to poor decisions, but they'd managed to wrestle it into submission for now. And that was something. Think they'll ever send us somewhere nice? Jax mused, sipping something that claimed to be coffee but tasted more like regret. Like a beach planet? Rena asked. I wouldn't count on it. We're more the fire and brimstone types. Speak for yourself, Taran said, smirking. I'm all for a vacation. How about when pigs fly? Rena shot back. By then, we'll be dealing with flying pigs, Jax laughed. The atmosphere lightened as they traded quips, the weight of what they'd accomplished settling in slowly. They'd averted disaster, even if it had been by the skin of their teeth. And as they sat in the cramped control room, surrounded by flickering screens and the hum of machinery, it felt like a victory. Think we'll ever get used to this kind of thing? Jax asked, his tone thoughtful for once. Taran shrugged. I hope not, because the day this becomes normal is the day we really should worry. Here's to hoping, Rena said, raising her mug in a mock toast. They clinked mugs, the sound a small but defiant victory cheer in the vast silence of space. And as the stars wheeled overhead, as endless and unknowable as ever, the team found solace in the simple fact that they were still here, still fighting, still laughing. The galaxy might be a dangerous, unpredictable place, but they were damn good at navigating it. All right, Taran said, standing up and stretching. Back to work. We've got an ancient entity to babysit, remember? Can't let it have all the fun, Jax agreed, rising with a lazy grin. Rena sighed, but there was a hint of a smile on her lips. Who needs sleep when you have existential threats to manage? Together, they turned back to their tasks, a sense of camaraderie knitting them together. They weren't perfect, but they were good at what they did. And in the grand scheme of things, that was more than enough. As they worked, they couldn't shake the feeling that their little adventure would have ripple effects far beyond this museum. Maybe they'd inspire some kid back on Earth to study xenobiology. Maybe they'd spark debates about the ethics of resurrecting extinct species. Or maybe they'd just make some bureaucrats' day a little more surreal. But whatever the outcome, they'd done their part. They'd faced the darkness and come out the other side, a little wiser and a lot more sarcastic. And in a universe where disaster lurked around every corner, that was no small feat. Hey, Taran, Jax said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Ever think about writing a book? You know, How Not to Die in Space. Taran chuckled. Sure, right after I finished my memoirs, what I did on my summer vacation, survived a museum. You'd sell at least one copy, Rena teased. I'd buy it just for the laughs. High praise, Taran replied with a mock bow. I'll add you to the acknowledgements. They continued their work, the banter a soothing balm against the weariness creeping into their bones. Because in the end, they were just three people trying to make sense of a universe that seemed determined to keep them on their toes. And somehow, against all odds, they were doing just that. All right, Taran said, glancing at the chronometer. Let's wrap this up and get some shut-eye. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Hopefully not another apex predator, Jax replied, settling into his chair with a sigh. Rena grinned, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Hey, you never know. Maybe we'll just get a nice, quiet day for once. Taran shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. In this line of work? Dream on. With that, they settled in for the night, the hum of the ship a comforting lullaby. They'd faced one of the galaxy's oldest nightmares and lived to tell the tale. And as they drifted off to sleep, they couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd be ready for whatever came next. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and often downright dangerous. But as long as they had each other, they figured they'd be all right. After all, they'd managed this far. What was a little more chaos between friends?